Great to see all of you here. It's kind of unusual for me to be here. This is not a position that I'm comfortable in, but I wanted to share with you some of the things in my life that have made a difference, perhaps for you, perhaps for your sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and grandchildren. I hope it has meaning for you. I wanted to start out by talking about, and I don't have a sense of humor like Bruce. Wasn't he great? You know, he's just great. And I was going to try to do this extemporaneously, and I wrote down a few bullet points, but I started really writing it out this year, which will make Bruce and Buddy and our Dallas Way group real happy because they want to get a lot of stuff reduced to writing. So if you have stories to tell, please either share them verbally, orally, or in writing. But I wanted to share with you some of the people who inspired my activism. Of course, most of you know that I had a partner and a lover and a husband for 42 years who passed away earlier this year. But he was truly the wind beneath my wings. He's the one who really insisted that I become involved in the community. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And of course, our children, Laura Grossman Cloud and Barney Grossman, who are both married, and maybe Barney and maybe Laura are here tonight, I'm not sure. They were going to try to be here. They supported us in every endeavor we ever undertook. And we have lots and lots of stories about that, but we won't go into those tonight. There was a guy by the name of Howie Dare who founded the Oakland Counseling Center back in 1981. There was a guy by the name of John Thomas, who's already been spoken about tonight, whom I met at the Experience Weekend in 1982, I think, and got me involved in the Black Tie Dinner Committee and later anointed me to be his successor to the Human Rights Campaign Board of Directors. And then my good friend Lori Masters, whom I met when the Women's Motorcycle Club made the Oakland Counseling Center the beneficiary of their weekend roundup at their variety show and their weekend here. Start out by telling you a little bit about Howie Dare that I met when he purchased his condo on Dickinson from George, who was on-site sales at the time. We became good friends, and in 1981, having dinner with Howie, he told us of his plans to open a community counseling center with a sliding fee scale so that no one could be turned away. He was a couple of months away from being ready, but his plan sounded intriguing. He had one benefactor, whose name you may or may not know. It was Joe Fleming. He needed another, so George and I stepped up to the plate. But only anonymously, as I wasn't really out in my company. Everybody knew, of course. And he was ready to open Oakland Counseling Center. A couple months later, he asked me to come on his board of directors. But I was very reluctant, as I probably would have to come out publicly. George Amerson told me I had an obligation to him, our kids, and our community, and the community that supported our real estate business. So thus it began. Joe Fleming was president. I was vice president in charge of fundraising, and Howie inspired me to go on to bigger and better things in the community, actually on his dying bed several years later. Now I'd like to share with you a couple of short vignettes about some of the more meaning experiences we've had. I've lost a whole page of notes here. I can't believe it. Well, I'm going to do it extemporaneously after all, I guess. There was a lady by the name of Annette Strauss who wanted to be mayor of the city of Dallas. And there was a man by the name of Don Baker who wanted to make sure that we had a city of Dallas mayor who would be inclusive with our community. So he thought that the best strategy would be to bring together the representatives of all of the identified gay and lesbian organizations in the city to meet with the potential mayor, the mayoral candidate, Annette Strauss. He asked us if we would host a reception at our home and invite all the representatives of the different organizations to meet she was the mayor pro tem at the time, running for mayor of the city of Dallas. And so he organized this thing, and one night, I think it was in 1986, he had organized this beautiful, beautiful reception in our home where we had cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, and we had a big, beautiful cake there that said, "Yes, yes, Annette." Now, for those of you who are not old enough to know what this means, there was a very popular Broadway musical, No, No, Nanette, at the time. So we had this big cake that said, "Yes, yes, Annette." And so after cocktails and hors d'oeuvres and this wonderful cake that she was so impressed with that she used this in her campaign material later on, we all gathered in our living room in a big circle, and she went around and she shook hands with everybody there and introduced herself, and every member of every organization introduced themselves and what organization they represented. She then said to all of us, "If I am elected and when I am elected, I promise that I will be a mayor for all of Dallas," there in our living room. "I promise I will be a mayor for all of Dallas." She wouldn't make any promises about anything other than she would be a mayor for all of Dallas. Well, let's fast forward a couple of years. In 1987, I was on the board of the Human Rights Campaign and on the board of the Black Tie Dinner Committee. I was on the Black Tie Dinner Committee. And one of my jobs on the Black Tie Dinner Committee was to provide speakers for the dinner. In 1987, we had a speaker by the name of Gary Studs, who was a representative from a U.S. representative from the House of Congress from Massachusetts. Gary Studs had been outed in a scandal that involved a House page a couple of years earlier, and then very bravely came out before the whole Congress and the United States of America and the world that it was difficult for him as a gay man and not be able to express himself, and that he had admitted this affair with this page. And he was kind of a hero in our community, and I'm sure most of you don't remember that, but he was very much a hero in our community. At the March on Washington in 1987, George and I met Gary Studs at a Human Rights Campaign function and had spent a little time getting to know him. So when we asked him to be our speaker and he agreed, we asked him to be our house guest, and he delightfully accepted. Well, we picked him up from the airport and we went back to our house, and we asked him if he would like to have a tour of the gay and lesbian community in the Dallas area, and he said absolutely. So we very proudly took him around to different places in Dallas, and we had prearranged with Mike Merdian, who was at the time the director of the AIDS Services Dallas Ewing House, which was the first apartment complex. Kay, you remember this very well. You did dinner there all the time, which housed the PWAs who had no place else to be. We had a guide on the tour that Saturday afternoon, and he took us around the building, and we looked into some of the apartments there, and we saw some of the guys there laying on their beds, and they had their televisions on, and they had these rabbit ears, if you can imagine in those days. Some of you weren't around in those days. These rabbit ears with wire hangers and tin foil and all that. And Studs looked at the guide and he said, "Don't you have cable here?" And the guide said, "No, we don't. We have it to the building, but the installers won't come into the building because we have people with AIDS here." He said, "As a matter of fact, we can't even get postal service, the post office, to come into the building to bring us our mail." And Studs kind of looked weird, and he said, "That's not acceptable." Well, later that night at the black tie dinner, there was a reception held by the Federal Club upstairs before the dinner began. And of course, as a host, I brought Gary Studs to this meeting. He was going to be the featured speaker that night. And our mayor, Annette Strauss, was there, and I introduced them. And then we chatted for a while, and then Mayor Strauss said that she had to leave, that she had another engagement she had to be to. So I asked if I could walk her to her car, and she graciously accepted. And as we were going down the escalator at the Fairmont Hotel, I started to tell her about this embarrassing situation that had happened that afternoon at the Ewing House of AIDS Services Dallas. And she grew angry. And she said to me, "I won't have that in my city." And as we walked to the car, she opened her purse and took out a little daytimer or a phone book of some kind, and a pad and a piece of paper, and she wrote down a man's name and a telephone number, and she said, "Now I want you to call these people first thing Monday morning, ask for this man, and tell him that I told you to call. The city of Dallas franchises the cable service in this city, and I will not have that in my city." So I took the piece of paper, she went on her way, we had a beautiful black tie dinner. Monday morning, before I got out of bed, the phone rang. It was the director of franchise and utility services for the city of Dallas, saying the mayor had called him the night before and wanted to get to the bottom of this, and she wanted that fixed at the Ewing House immediately. And he wanted details from me, and I gave him the address and the people to contact and so forth. Wednesday morning, we had cable service at the Ewing House. And I'm sure through Gary Studs' effort, we had postal delivery inside the building. Another little vignette I wanted to talk to you about a little bit tonight is an experience that we had back in 1992. For those of you that can remember that far back, our illustrious Bill Clinton was running against George H.W. Bush, and a man by the name of Ross Perot entered the fray. And, I'm surprised this story hasn't been told more. But Ross Perot went on TV in an interview with Barbara Walters and said that it was when the talk was about gays in the military and all that. And he said that, he wasn't sure about gays in the military, but he would never appoint a cabinet member who was openly gay. Well, this was really quite challenged in our community, as you can well imagine. And I was on the board of the Human Rights Campaign at the time, and we had lots of discussions about this via conference calls and all that. And shortly after that, in 1992, several of us, and I think there's probably some of you here tonight that were involved in this, were invited for a conversation with Mort Myerson, who was the president of EDS Systems under Ross Perot, that Ross Perot built and named the Myerson Center for, and was really strong-arming his campaign for president. Well, Mort Myerson had a son by the name of David Myerson, who said very strongly that he would not help his father as long as he had such a stance against gays in the military and gays in his cabinet if he were elected. So Mort Myerson called together a group of people, several of us from the community. Mike, I don't know if you were there. Karen, I don't know if you were there. Lori, I don't remember. I know Deb Elder was there. John Thomas was there. Bruce, I think you were there. And together on a Saturday afternoon at the EDS headquarters in North Dallas. And what he really told us was that his son David would not help him support the Perot candidacy for president because of his stance on gays. And so Mort said, you know, I know that he really doesn't mean this. He just doesn't know. He's just not educated about the gay and lesbian community and what it's all about. He doesn't know what it really means. So if you all will help me, and he heard from each of us. I mean, I can remember when he used the term sexual preference, and Deb Elder said, "Sir, we prefer to call it sexual orientation. It is not a preference." Bless her heart, Deb. And he listened, and he listened earnestly. And then he asked us all to help him convince Ross Perot that this was not a good thing and that he needed to be more open-minded about what the gay and lesbian, bi, transgender community was about. He asked us to help him by providing testimonials, books, information, anything he could give to Perot to help him understand our community better. Well, we all participated. We all brought stuff over to Myerson's house, and we all had some more dialogue about it. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a call from the Human Rights Campaign director at the time, Tim McFeely, who said that Myerson had called another meeting together, but this time he wanted the national leaders of our community to join him, not just the local community. So, and they asked me if I would attend, and it was on a weekday, not a Saturday like it previously had been, and it was kind of a disruption of everything that was going on in our lives. But we all went back to the Perot headquarters, and we sat with Mort for about 15 minutes, and then he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to meet Ross Perot." And Perot came into the room, and he sat, and he asked questions, and we asked him questions, and we visited together for a couple of hours, and when it was over, he apologized for the remarks he had made to the Barbara Walters interview and about his feelings about gays in the military, and that he would welcome anybody into his cabinet or into his administration who was qualified, and it didn't matter what their orientation, their sexual orientation was. And when it was all over, and I'm telling you, there were the leaders of all of the different communities of the gay lesbian community in that room. And even that attorney that you all see on TV still, Gloria Allred, was there. And he said, "Well, I'm so glad to have had this meeting. I apologize to you for any slights I've given to you." And then he said, I would like you to meet some very important people in my life. And he brought in his wife, Margot, and two of his daughters, and introduced us all to him one by one. Of course, we were wearing name tags, but nonetheless, he really made us all feel like we were welcome and would be a part of any administration should he be elected. So I thought that was kind of a cool experience that I wanted to share with you tonight. And then one more little interesting experience that I think you might enjoy. Except for it has to be done with anonymity because I don't want to identify the organization that was involved in it, but I think you'll get a kick out of it. Like I said earlier, my kids, Laura and Barney, have always been an important part of my life. They've always been there to support me. They've always been right there behind me, in front of me, welcoming all of you into their lives and an important part of their lives as well. Well, one night, and this is probably 30 years ago, there was an organization that shall remain nameless, and I'm going to call them a social organization. And we were having a kind of an initial reception at our home. And we had a big home in North Dallas, so we did a lot of these kind of things. And we were all sitting around. It was a cocktail reception. We had food and all this, and we tried to make it as nice. And there was 25, 30 people sitting around. And everybody's in kind of little cliques, or they're sitting by themselves. And, you know, we're trying to get this thing organized and make everybody a little compatible, you know, and it was just not working. You know how that is sometimes? It's just one of those real awkward kind of things. Well, Barney came to me, my son, who was probably 15 or 16 at the time. He said, Dad, these people may be gay, but they are not happy. So why don't you and George go back in the bedroom and roll a few joints and see if we can loosen things up here. Well, I'm here to tell you that organization is still going today, strong as ever. Thank you.